headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Good morning, Michael. Great to be back with you this morning on the home of common sense. Hey, and listen, Boris Johnson, it seems you've had a massive impact on him because, of course, he's coming out now and speaking a lot of common sense. But, of course, there's a lot left to be decided with him. But I know on this issue, on the trans issue, at least, he's admitting that men cannot compete in women's sport. Can you believe that's actually a headline?
Well, do you know what? I said that exact thing this morning. I said, you can't even believe that it's actually news, that, you know, somebody who has declared what a woman is has suddenly done something that nobody else can seemingly do in the world of politics. It's astonishing, isn't it?
I know, it's astonishing. But look, here's the thing as well. Keir Starmer, apparently the opposition, I mean, if they'd come out and said, actually, no, women can't have penises, he might have got a few votes, you know. I mean, yes. I don't understand this whole kind of fixation with not calling a woman and what they really are and what men really are. What is wrong with our politicians? I mean, they're pandering to a small minority, a fringe little group that are, you know, the trans lobby group and all that. And it doesn't make any sense because most of us, any survey around the country, you ask anybody in any poll that says, should a man compete in a women's sport under the trans umbrella, they just simply say no, because it's unfair, it's cheating. And as I pointed out last night on my social media, you don't hear of women becoming men and competing in men's sports. Interesting thought that, Mike, isn't it?
Well, you don't, do you? I wonder why that is.
It's probably got something to do with the disadvantage because most of these that are trans from male to females into their sports, it's an advantage because they are plain out and out cheaters. That's what they are. And I know there's been a huge... And listen, Boris Johnson at last is speaking common sense. Now, he's not speaking common sense on a lot of stuff, but on this issue, thank God, a politician has finally come out and said women can't have penises, because that's what he said in effect, isn't he?
Yes, exactly right. And I mean, as you say, it kind of beggars belief that this has been a dominating story, sort of post-COVID. You know, we've got a war on in Ukraine. We've got... I mean, I'll tell you what we must talk about is this ridiculous story about the army having a load of diesel nicked from their depot. I mean, if they can't even stop people nicking diesel from them, what chance have we got as a fighting force, for heaven's sake? But also, you know, the fact that there's all sorts of other stories going on. There's all manner of arguments to be had about all sorts of things post-COVID, you know, getting back to business, making the economy work, the cost of living, and all these people are hung up and can't answer a simple question.
I know, it's amazing. I mean, we got local elections coming up in May. Yeah. And of course, a lot of these MPs have been asked this question. And I think it's been triggered by mainstream media because they're posing it, because they're trying to catch them out. But the fact that they can't give a simple answer, what is wrong with people? People are watching and listening to the show today. Cabbies in London, people at home, mothers in the kitchen listening to the show right now. They're probably thinking, yeah, you're right, because it makes sense. You know, women are women. They're born with certain genitalia, and men are men. Why are people so hung up on this issue? And I think it's partly to do with the trans lobbyists who are really pitching their case right now, and they've had this, you know, the ban on gender conversion, all that kind of stuff, therapy. That's a big part of it as well. But politicians need to start speaking honestly with people, say what they think, and speak common sense, because they're not speaking common sense to people. They don't make any sense to anybody.
You walk around any part of this country, possibly with the exception of some bits of London, you know, which have gone so woke that you wouldn't even believe you were living on the same planet as some of these characters, right? But where you live, where most people live outside of London, nobody cares about net zero. Nobody cares about, you know, gender reassignment. Nobody cares about anything other than, can I put enough petrol in the car to get to where I want to go? Can I feed my kids before they go to school? You know, am I going to be able to pay the electricity bill when it next comes in? You know, that kind of thing. Is it going to be even possible to go away on holiday if I've got the money to do so come the summer? That's all they care about. They don't care about defining women, do they?
No, well, going back to that net zero thing as well, you know, they don't care about that for the simple reason it's an impossible task. It's like this COVID zero thing where we wanted to get rid of COVID completely. We're never going to achieve net zero. And this kind of addiction to going green and the cost that it's having, the burden on hard-working, low-paid families in the country is absolutely absurd. And the government publishing today their energy security plan for the future by 2030. Hang on, we're in 2022.
Yeah.
That's 8 years. Yeah. 8 years.
I'll be gaga by then, Richard.
You will be, mate.
I won't care where the energy's coming from, as long as I'm still walking.
Sponsored by Moss Bros for your suits as well.
That's it. Very good. Excellent. Very true. But, I mean, let's talk about that, because you were going to tell me this morning about the state of play in business in Wales, because let's face it, you know, we've now got, added to all of the things that don't work in this country that we've run through before, you know, the police service that doesn't arrest anybody, the border force doesn't stop anybody coming into the country, the NHS that doesn't see anybody or treat anybody. We've now got airlines that don't want anybody to fly.
Well, Spain did that, didn't they? It was last night. They did a U-turn on saying the unvaxxed could travel, and then they changed it within a few hours later. I mean, it's just absurd. But business in Wales is not good. You know, there was a report published in I think it was iBusiness Live earlier this morning that talked about business confidence is an all-time low since the last report. And they blamed it on a whole host of reasons. And of course, the Russia and Ukraine war is a big part of it. But I want to remind people that business in Wales has been bad for decades under Welsh Labour-led government here in Wales. For the simple reason they're not pro-business. They had an opportunity to build the M4 relief road, which was a massive contentious issue here, which would have seen businesses flood into Wales because transport is linked to the economy, of course, Mike, as you know, and without the flow of that traffic coming into Wales, then business is strangled. And they refused to build it. Guess why? Because it wasn't green enough, because it would have an impact on the climate. But here's the thing. If you come down the Bryn Glass tunnels here in Wales, on the M4 road they're talking about building, that relief road, it's like a car park. Cars are just parked up there, pumping fumes out in the air. So why on God's green earth didn't they build a relief road that would have saved the car park, got traffic flowing and brought businesses into Wales? That's one reason. And the fact is as well, we have the head of the economy here in Wales, Vaughan Gethin, or Vaughan Gessin as I like to call him. He was in charge of the NHS in Wales.
I was going to say, he used to be the health secretary, didn't he?
And he was terrible. We had 5 out of 7 of our health boards here in Wales in special measures under Vaughan Gethin. And he wasn't demoted. Guess what they did, Mike? They promoted him to the Minister for the Economy. I'm like, what is it? Why are you doing this? Why are you promoting failure? And this is a guy that was a solicitor.
But this happens in all political parties, isn't it? I mean, you get people in national government in Westminster. One minute they're, Secretary of State for Housing. Next minute they're running the NHS or something, or running schools. And you go, hang on a minute. I thought you didn't know anything about housing. You know even less about the economy and even less about the NHS.
Well, it's jobs for the boys, isn't it? Because they've not got experience in it and they rely on civil servants to do the job for them. That's literally what happens in government, I'm sure, because they're not qualified to do the job. In Vaughan Gethin's case, he is not qualified. If you'd seen the state of the NHS pre-COVID, I've mentioned this on the show before, Mike. Before COVID, it was a disaster. Waiting times, operations. We have the highest rate of waiting list in the whole of the UK, far worse than England NHS. And at one stage, we were talking about sending our patients to England for, serious operations because we couldn't cope with them in Wales. But you won't hear Mark Drakeford talk about that. He'll tell you how wonderful things are in Wales, and Wales is better than England. And if anything bad in Wales, it's because of Westminster. It's not because of Westminster. It's because of his government and his leadership. And the poverty that we're seeing in Wales right now is because of devolution here in Wales under Mark Drakeford. It's as simple as that, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely right. Martin sent me a little tweet. Martin's a big, important man. He's got 2 followers. He's following 2 people. He's got no followers on Twitter, but he's pointing out quite rightly that I said it was the Army that the diesel was nicked from. It was from the Navy. I was just seeing if you're paying attention, Martin. Thanks for listening, mate. Let's talk a little bit about Rishi Sunak, right? Now, I said yesterday, you know that this is where you get all the greatest political insight in the world, right? I said yesterday to John Rentoul, what's going on in Downing Street? I'm hearing that there's a massive kind of war going on, and Boris Johnson is basically going to discredit as much as he possibly can Rishi Sunak before he fires him as Chancellor. Suddenly today, we find out his wife is a non-dom. I wonder how that happened.
But Mike, I do think this is I've seen this. They've ramped up this attack on Rishi, haven't they, over the last couple of weeks? Of course, those.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. It's all coming from Boris.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, look, it's definitely coming from somewhere. I mean, your guess is Boris. It won't be far from the truth there. But look, they're attacking his wife. I mean, she's paying taxes in the country where she's making money. She also pays taxes here in the UK as well for businesses she has in the UK. I mean, let's not. Again, another obsession from the trans thing to Rishi's wife all over the newspapers this morning. Yeah. Yes, he's been very successful. He's made a lot of money, and he's a politician, right? But I'm not a great fan of his, but I will say I'd rather have someone in charge of the economy, even though I don't think he's doing an excellent job right now, and I think lockdown's a bad thing as well. But at the end of the day, at least he knows what he's doing with money to a certain extent because he's a businessman. We talked about it earlier just now. People in jobs, in positions where they're not qualified to do it. At least he must know something about money because of his...
Oh, yeah. No, I just find it...
I'd rather have him in charge of it.
No, listen, you're quite right. I mean, I couldn't care less whether she's a non-dom or not. She pays plenty of tax here, I'm sure. I'm sure she spends plenty of money here. I'm sure her VAT bill would dwarf anything that you and I have ever seen in our lives in terms of an income. But that's not the point. I mean, she's an Indian citizen. They don't allow her to be anything else. So therefore, she has to have that status. I don't really mind about that. I just find it interesting that at some point now, he seems to be under attack and all of these stories will come out. And I dare say there'll be more.
Well, because let's not forget as well, I remember, I think it was last year, Rishi Sunak wasn't really that happy about the net zero plan that the government were proposing at the time. Well, not fully proposing, we've had it now. He was against it, and for a whole number of reasons. And I think the cost and the impact of it as well. I think the Climate Change Committee said it'll cost around 50 billion a year. The National Grid had predicted it'll cost total, get carbon neutral by 2030, 2050, it'll be £3 trillion. I mean, those were estimates, and these were loose estimates.
Yeah. And
I think Rishi Sunak realised, hang on a minute, we can't do that. We don't have that kind of money. But of course, Boris sees him as a threat to his leadership, and I think that's going to be a big contest ahead of us. And before the next general election, I've got a funny feeling that Rishi's making some moves, and who knows? But I definitely think those attacks are coming from Boris's office.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that, because it's very easy to be popular when you're giving money to all and sundry around the country, and even his own MPs would rather think he was rather a good-looking guy for the next Prime Minister. But I think that's all gone now, because I think Boris Johnson clearly now, and also if it gets back to the old Boris, where he's actually making statements that do make sense, that people in the rest of the country outside of Westminster actually can absolutely relate to, then he's home free, isn't he?
Well, I don't know if you can trust him more, because he said all the right things about Brexit. Remember when he said get Brexit done, but then our fishing waters are still being plundered by EU vessels.
Yes.
The Northern Ireland situation is still ongoing, the border and stuff. So, the protocol. So actually, he didn't really deliver. And a lot of Brexiteers I've been speaking to the last couple of months, Mike, are really disillusioned with Boris Johnson, because they voted for him, put their trust in him in 2019, believing he would get Brexit done. But it's not the Brexit that they believed in and voted for. And I think, again, he's making statements at certain times to say the right things. But then who knows, in a couple of months, Boris is like, he could change his tune. They'll have a committee set up, they'll spend millions of pounds on it to talk about, what trans people feel, and he'll change his mind on it. But let's hope not. Let's hold his feet to the fire and make sure he stays with common sense, because that is the best place to be, because the public are fed up of politicians placating these small minority groups who actually don't represent people in society, not hard-working people that are out there today listening and watching the show, who just want the government to get on with doing what the government does, stay out of our lives, less state, less involvement in our everyday lives, and get on with sorting out the economy so we can all live a decent life.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.